Hey guys, how you going? Hope you're all doing very well. This evening I'm going to be doing another movie review, so hopefully you find this one interesting. This movie is a crime film from Vietnam, Vietnamese language English subs, released in the year 1995, directed by Anh Hun Tran, and this film is called Cyclo. So Cyclo is about a very, very poor family. The young teenager is a Cyclo, which is basically a bicycle taxi. It doesn't pay a lot of money, it's very physically demanding, but this is the life that he has no other options. So this is what he's known, and this is what he believes is normal. So his sister is a shoe shine. His older sister is working at this restaurant, and the grandfather works pumping up tyres. And so they really struggle, but that struggle is about to be intensified one day when this teenager's Cyclo is stolen. So he reports this to his boss. The boss is not very happy, and she says that she has a different plan for him, that he's going to repay the stolen Cyclo through a life of crime. So she introduces the main character to a series of very shady individuals that put him through a range of jobs that involve the corruption of innocence and basically passing a point of no return. So whether or not this main character can get out of the life in crime in time is something you're going to have to find out for yourself, because that's as far as I'm going with my synopsis. Now my thoughts on Cyclo. I was actually very surprised to see that this movie won a lot of awards, and so it does have a lot of recognition, but for some reason it just never came onto my radar. It actually doesn't come on to many people's radars, and so I like Asian crime films, especially from Japan and South Korea, but Vietnam is not really known. And so when I come across this movie in a second-hand DVD shop here in Canberra, I was surprised to see all the accolades that this movie has. It's said to be a very nasty film. It's said to be a wake-up call in what society does in some countries out there, and so I thought, oh no, well, why not give this movie a try? It was very cheap, so I really wasn't risking anything, and expectations were at a very curious level. As I said, no one talks about this movie, didn't even know about this movie's existence before I come across it in a shop, and sometimes those experiences can be the most exciting. So I was eagerly anticipating what I was going to get with Cyclo, and after finally watching this movie, I will say that it does achieve a lot of what it sets out to, but it is let down by certain aspects in its production. There's something I'll go into a little bit later, but ultimately this is a movie about why some people turn to crime, and how limited options can actually force you into a life that you don't necessarily like, but you have to do it. It's because the rest of the world is moving on and you're going to be left behind. And so this main character, he starts off as a very hardworking young individual with a very high work ethic. He is a family man. He's looking out for his mother, sister, and grandfather. But then when he loses the Cyclo, this is where he is thrown to the wolves. He basically introduced to a world that is way out of his depth. He's in over his head. And so the situation is deteriorating by the minute. And I thought it was just a continuous nightmare, the way that this character evolves from someone that was fun and loving to someone who has completely lost their identity, completely lost their innocence, and basically forced to grow up very, very quickly. And how many times in today's world do you hear about this from countries where the poor community are left to fend for themselves? And that can be a very dangerous thing, and it was a very depressing aspect that this movie possessed. And so I definitely feel as though it deserves this extreme tag, not necessarily through the violence. There is some pretty hard violence, but it's more a case of the cruelty and the savagery of the outside world when an innocent person comes into a world that they completely have no understanding of, and they're completely out of their depth, and how the manipulation starts to affect this main character. I thought it was just a really cruel and downbeat experience. And so I thought the acting was phenomenal, especially from the main character. I thought the cinematography was excellent. It used the poor environment in a way where it felt like a continuous nightmare. I felt as though nothing was ever good in the film. I thought as though there was no positivity, there was no innocence. It was all being corrupted away, and it just felt like an underbelly of society that you didn't want to be associated with, and that we pretend doesn't exist, but it does exist. And Cyclo is definitely a first-hand experience in what this underbelly is, and how innocent people are going to be absolutely torn to pieces by the wolves. And that's exactly what happens to this poor main character. And I thought the journey was just very unforgiving. It's making no apologies, and it's basically an eye-opening experience. And so the atmosphere is complemented through the very matter-of-fact violence. It's not glorified. There is no glorification in this movie whatsoever. I thought it was very cruel what happens to the sister. I'm not going to tell you what the sister has to go through, but it's equally as disturbing and cruel and downbeat. And so the whole film has a really dark heart, and that dark heart really captures you in a way that a lot of crime films out there fail to do, because the crime in a lot of films, say for example, you've got your gangster movies from Hollywood, they glorify that life. It's almost like you want to be part of the gangster life because it's all glamorous, it's all money, it's all power. But in reality, it's not all about that. And I definitely feel as though Cyclo captures the real atmosphere of crime. This is a world you don't want to be a part of because you're doing things that you don't want to do. And when you actually do them, the repercussions it has on you mentally, the mental deterioration of this main character, I thought was fascinating, but at the same time, really hard to watch. And so it is an art house film. There are some ways that the camera is used that I thought was very unique, especially for 1995. I thought it was actually very creative, especially a scene involving paint that I thought was very, very nightmarish, and it just caught me off guard. And the whole film just has a really unnerving presence about it that I actually felt as though this is a movie that I was surprised hasn't got more marketing, because it does have recognition, it does have awards, but within a very enclosed circle. And I definitely feel as though this movie deserves to be seen by a broader audience, because it does show you crime for what it is. Crime doesn't pay. Crime is not glamorous. Crime, you have to see horrible things. And what this young man has to see, I thought was very horrific. It's a very brutal film, but the brutality is more intensified through the environment as opposed to graphic violence. Yes, there is some violence that is very matter-of-fact and realistic, but it's more a case of the world that is just completely tearing the innocence from this main character. And so the supporting characters, I thought, were all very seedy and disturbing, but the performances were absolutely fantastic. It reminded me of the atmosphere of City of God from Brazil, where that was a matter-of-fact film that was really, really hard to watch, and it really summed crime up for what it is. Crime is ugly. This is not a life that you want to be a part of, and I definitely feel as though City of God and Cyclo really emulated that very, very well. And there's not many other movies out there that showcase crime for the underbelly sort of seediness that it really is. And so this whole film goes for nearly 2 hours, and I felt as though that was a little bit too long. And this is ultimately where I have a problem with the movie, is that it needed editing. There were moments where I didn't really feel it was needed, because it didn't really evolve the story. It just kind of halted the progression. And there were some moments with the score that I felt really out of place. And so, for example, someone's getting attacked and there was music that was put into there that just completely took me out of the realms of reality, and it just felt as though it didn't belong. It felt as though the director didn't know how to use the score as a powerful character of its own, and it just kind of distracts you to some extent. And so there are moments in this movie that do distract you to prevent it from being an absolute classic. But as far as crime films are concerned, if you want to see something a little bit different that is really going to make you depressed by the time the movie finishes, then Cyclo is one I would recommend. It's very hard to watch. As I said, not so much because of the graphic violence the movie has, but more a case of the innocence that has been corrupted so horribly, and it just goes from bad to worse very quickly. And so if you are into the really dark crime underbelly films, Cyclo is one I would recommend. I'm going to give this movie 3.5 stars. Alright guys, that's it for my review. Hope you enjoyed it. Till next time, keep watching movies, and I'll see you later. Bye.